Hey guys, I'm Charles Neal. You know, sometimes you just want to have a little fun, do something kind of simple and kind of fast. Well, Mama wants a bench, a simple bench. Going to put it outside, but I kind of want it to look old, rustic. So here's what I've got. We're going to do a 5-board bench, and we're going to do it as simple as possible. What I've got is I've got 5 boards. I've got some hemlock. I've got 2 pieces right here. These are 11 3/4 wide. They're 18 inches tall. I've got 2 pieces that are going to be my sides or the aprons on the bench. They're going to be 4 inches, and right now they're 48 inches long. I got another piece that's 4 foot by 11 3/4. Now this is hemlock. One of the reasons I decided to film this is you might have some fun doing one. And a lot of times you'll see hemlock in the box stores, and it's a lot of times they'll just call it whitewood. And you can pick it out pretty easy, because one of the things about it is it's kind of in the pine or conifer family, is it usually has all these little teeny knots in it, and you know, if you get a close-up on it there, you can certainly recognize it. And one of the reasons, like I said, I wanted to do this is that there's a whole lot of stuff out on the internet around, quote, the pines, saying you can't finish them. Well, I beg to differ that, but let's move on. You go to the box store and you see shelving board. It's typically a white pine, a ponderosa pine. It can basically kind of be anything. If you see it and you see these sap streaks in it, leave it alone. You don't want that. You know, to understand a little bit about pine or any conifers, when they kill dry, they also have to bake it, if you will. They have to get those kilns up to about 160 degrees for a certain period of time in order to set the sap in it. If they don't, this is what you get. And that resin in there is, well, it's almost impossible to do anything with in finishing. The only thing out there that if you run into it that will seal it off is some shellac. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on pines. This is a piece of nice, clear white pine. Now, this came from a mill. And the only reason I thought about doing this is because, you know, a majority of woodworkers, when you first start woodworking, they go to the box store and they get some pine or some hemlock. You know, 2x4s, 4x4s, 1x12s. Now here's a caution. When you go to a box store or a lumber yard or lumber mill and you're buying wood to build something out of, and you're basically using construction grade lumber, you have to understand something. That wood is typically not as dry as something like this. And so a good idea is to get it in and let it dry. Skim plane it a little bit and just let it set around a while so it can further dry. All right. The other thing you want to watch for when you're buying it is let's look at the end of the board. If the end of this board, this one's got a little, but if you're seeing a whole lot of these growth rings going like this, try to avoid that where you can. That piece of wood is going to almost always cup. And it's going to cup typically in this direction. If you're picking out a 2x4 or something, and you look on the end of it and you see what looks like a bullseye, you don't want that either. even in a 4x4. For construction, that's the heart of the tree, and that is the strongest part. But it always cracks. Always. You want to avoid that for construction of anything that's going to be a furniture type project. Okay, so we've got a piece of white pine and we've got our hemlock. Now, one thing with the hemlock, as well as I know the ponderosa pines and some of those, as well as yellow pines, one of the difficult parts of being able to deal with them is that you have hard and soft grains, often referred to as winter and summer. And if you look, you can see the brown, then you see the white, and the brown and the white. The brown is what's called a winter wood because the tree actually is growing much slower and the wood is tighter and denser. So this makes sanding it, getting it nice and smooth and level, very difficult. As well, the knots. Knots are nothing more than an end grain. So you've got an end grain coming up into a flat grain or a soft grain. It can be tough. Pine blotches, very bad. This hard and soft grain is not going to absorb a stain or a dye at the same rate. So this is a really tough animal to deal with. Now, the other thing in pines, and it really doesn't matter which one, you're going to have knots. If you look, when you're looking at them, the best way to tell is typically a loose knot, or a knot that's going to become loose, is usually black or much darker. But if you look closer, you're going to see a very dark membrane around the outside of the knot. That's basically bark. And it doesn't hold very tight. On the same token, if you see a knot that's brown and you don't see that black membrane, you have a tight knot. Now here's something else interesting about pines. The resin in the pines, the knots in the pines, they just play murder on your tools. They're really tough on your tools. They're hard on saw blades, planer knives. They give them a fit. They really do. Like I said, 9 times out of 10, most woodworkers, 9 times out of 10, wait a minute. I don't know where that come from. You know, it's a proven fact that 87% of all statistics are made up on the spot. Yep. So anyway, let's just suffice to say a lot of woodworkers, when they first start, they can run down to the box store, pick up some pine, and come back and start doing some woodworking. But it's soft, it's frustrating. And don't misunderstand, I like pine. Actually, what we're going to do with this 5-board bench is one of my favorite things. And I'm going to tell you something else too. You may find, you're like, Charles, why are you doing what you're going to be doing here? Well, I'm going to tell you why. I like doing it. It's a lot of fun. It's quick, it's easy, it's fast. But I'm going to tell you something else too. They sell. People like them. I remember many years ago, we had a little shop and there was a little main drag going by. And so I just made up about 4 or 5 5-board benches. And without even thinking, it was a nice sunny day, spring day, I set them outside. I put them out there for some of the finish to dry on them. Honest to goodness, within 2 hours, they were sold. Sold every one of them. And I tell you, we donated a little walnut 5-board bench about this long. It was about this wide, but it was kind of crooked. And we kind of used basically the same thing we're going to do here. Left it free form, cleaned it up. Don't leave the bark on because the bark ain't going to stay on. And stained it up and finished it up a little bit. and we donated it to one of the public television auctions, and that little bench brought $400 and some. Now I realized it was helping out the public station, but I'm going to tell you what, they sell. And so what we're going to do is what we call primitive. What's going to happen, we're going to cut this thing out, kind of rough it out actually. We're going to take a hand plane. It's going to take us about 10 minutes to sand it. We're going to do a little finishing on it, and we're going to be done. So I'll tell you where we're going to start. First thing I'm going to do is I want to get my legs cut out. So we're going to come right back, and we're going to figure out some legs. Be right back. Let's make the feet. Now I want something pretty simple, and I want something fast. So what I'm going to do is this is 11 3/4. I'm going to find my center, which is 5 7/8. Yep. Draw a center line. I'll show you. And I think what I want to do, let me take a look here. I'm 18 inches. I think I'm going to come up 5.5 inches. Put me a dot right in the center. All right. All we got is a straight line center, 5.5 inches. Just got a little dot. Now I'm going to get a Forstner bit. Is that too big? That's about right. What size is that? Inch and a quarter. I'm going to drill a hole right there. Then we're going to take and we're just going to angle off to make 2 feet. Drilling the hole rather than coming to a direct point is stronger than if I come to a point. It doesn't create a split area. Make sense? I never figured it out either, but it does. Let's drill a hole. All right. Good enough, no tear out. All right, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm thinking as I'm doing this. This isn't written in stone. I'm going to come in here 3 inches. And I'm not even going to worry about actually anything, because I'm going to make one side that's going to become my pattern for everything. So I'm just going to cut an angle. Don't even know what it is, because it doesn't matter, as long as it looks pretty decent. Now what this is going to look like, I'm just going to bandsaw this line and this line. Then I'm going to use that to translate to making the full pattern on the other piece, and we're done for the most part. Okay, just let me bandsaw this real quick and you'll see. All right. All I got to do is mate it up, draw it out, flip it, do the same thing. And I have what will be a uniform matching foot. Now I need to drill that hole again. No, I did not measure it, because all I'm going to do, since I traced it, is I'm just going to sight it, get in the middle of it, and drill about halfway down. Because that Forstner bit is going to leave me a center indentation right here, all I got to do is take my small bit, drill on through, and it'll mark the backside. All right, outside of a little hang up, we're good. Bandsaw it, we got that. All right, now all I got to do is simply match them up and cut the other. Now, one of the things, my top is the same width as my foot. So if I put this together, it's going to be kind of clunky looking because it doesn't have any overhang whatsoever. And I like an overhang. And besides that, we're going to be doing a little antiquing of the edges, so we need to get a little overhang in here. All right, my material I'm using, if you go to the box store, what you buy is going to be about 3/4 of an inch. I'm actually at an inch. The 3/4 fine. Okay. So if I've got 1 inch material, which is going to be this piece that runs down both sides for the top to sit on, and I want an overhang. I'd like to have at least an inch overhang. So my inch and an inch and a quarter overhang. I'm debating between inch and a quarter. I think I'm gonna go for the inch and a quarter. I like that. So that's 2 1/4 inches. So I'm gonna measure in 2 1/4 inches. And since my apron material, again, goes down the side, is going to be 4 inches, then I'm going to measure down 4. I thought my square slipped a little bit there. Okay. 4 inches. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the back side just so I can bandsaw it comfortably. Now somebody's going to ask me, oh wow, is hemlock good for outside use? No. But we can do some finishing on it and get some good finish on it. And when it's all said and done, if we coat the bottoms of these feet with some epoxy, that will help immensely. Good outdoor woods are, white oak is excellent. Cypress. You have one out here that's called Ipe. And of course, then you get into the teaks and all of that, you know. But this will last long enough. And as long as I do some epoxy and a good coat of finish on it, it'll be around for a while. Okay, let me cut this out. Now, our problem is going to be is that when this side piece sets in here, we're just going to have this clunk hanging out here. So we need to do something to make that just a little bit more attractive. Let's see what we can come up with here. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut it up right through here, just like this pin's going. We're going to spice it up just a little, and then, but that's not going to fit with that straight cut. But we're at the point now we do anything we want. So all I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to do just a little arc thing to try to, and I can't really see it good. I'll be able to bandsaw it. Do a little arc thing in here to try to bring this together. But you know, you can do it any way you want. Again, it's simple. We're just playing around here, going to build a 5-board bench. I'm going to go bandsaw it. And one thing about 5-board benches, close counts. All right, I guess that'll do. Close enough. All right, exact same thing. Trace it out. And we'll bandsaw it. Now all I'm going to do is flip it, trace it, come back and do the exact same thing. No difference. All right, I got a 4-foot bench. So what I did was I went over and cut my sides or stretchers. I cut them to 45. I wanted an 1.5 inch overhang on each end. And you can see I've just kind of got it setting up here roughly. What I don't like is I don't like this end just being clunky. So I'm thinking again, a little something with a little pretty to it. Now, one caution. Like I've said, you don't want to get this foot too far back under. And you want to be careful because somebody sitting on this end, you can tip a bench. Okay. Let me bandsaw it and see what we come up with. I think that'll work. Okay. Now let's take a look real careful. If I set my edge here at 1.5 inch overhang, that puts the back edge of this leg, right at 7 inches, 6 7/8. Time it comes up, it's going to be a little less than that. Let me take a look. 6 3/4. That's as far as I dare go back. I don't want to go back any more than that. Okay, now we're simply going to take that and use it to cut everything else. All right, bandsaw this, back to it. We almost got a 5-board bench. Now we're going to do something a little odd. I told you I wanted to antique it. I want to give it a little bit of a rustic flair. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got all these bandsawn edges. Now I've got one of them oscillating spindle sanders. I can run across these edges, smooth them up. But I know a lot of you don't. I also use the bandsaw to saw this out. A lot of you don't have a bandsaw. You know, you can take a 1995 jigsaw and do everything we've done here. Now we're going to be hand planing this. And I know how a lot of guys are about their hand planes. They've got all these big fancy ones and all that. This is a little Stanley. It's model number whatever the box store had to sell for $19.95. That's what it is. Oh yeah, I've got all kind of hand planes, but this will do the trick. Now these knots are going to give us a fit. Now when I set this hand plane up, I'm going to hand plane every surface. Underside, bottom side, top side. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this plane up by simply adjusting the blade back. I don't want a lot. And you're going to notice that typically on a lot of these, there's a little front area here that will slide fore and aft. All you got to do is take a piece of scrap, moving it back, forward, and the blade forward and back. You just want to be able to get a very light cut. That's a little too light. We don't want to tear it up, but we certainly want to lay down some texture. That's what we're after. Now the nice thing, I want to be able to feel those hand plane marks. That's what I want right there. When you're hand planing, now one of the things I want you to look at when you buy a little plane is try to get a low angle. I don't like a high angle on pine. I like a low angle because it shears a little better for me. Now, the other thing is, I'm going to tell you, these knots are going to dull your plane blade. But let's get through it. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to give us a pretty nice, smooth enough surface. You know, we don't want to lose any splinters or anything. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a little round over on the edge with a router bit. But I'm also going to show you, if you ain't got a router bit, don't worry about that either. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand plane all my surfaces. Then I'm going to take a sanding block, just simply a block of wood with some 80 grit sandpaper on it. I'm going to sand some of my bandsaw marks out of here. I can also take a file or a rasp, or again, start out with a piece of 80 grit sandpaper, clean up these edges a little bit, then go to like a 120 grit. If you get these up to about a 150 or 180 grit, you've done well. That's good enough. The other thing we don't want, we want to round over our edges here. We don't want any sharp surfaces, meaning we don't want any sharp edges. An old antique bench would have been worn and all of this. It would have no round edge, no straight or square edges. Now, to put it together, when it's standing up, we're going to sneak in the back of here, and right across here, I'm going to put a little block. I'm simply going to screw it on. That will allow me to come in from the bottom side up with the screw into the top. When I mount the apron right here, I'm also going to put some little cleats right along it to screw up from the bottom to hold the top on. So, but in this area, I'm going to have one in the center and one on each side. That'll give me 3 right across the leg. That's going to hold the top nice and tight. And we'll see all of that. I just want to kind of give you a premise of what we're going to do. Because before I do anything and I can assemble it, I want to get all my hand planing done. Because trying to hand plane this, attaching the block, and if it's together, that's just more trouble than it's worth. So I'm going to do the hand planing, then we're going to come back and look at cleaning up the edges and getting them ready to go. All right, the hand planing is done. Now I've just got a little block with that 80 and I'm just cleaning up the flat area here, the bandsaw marks, so that when I put my sides on, they'll fit nice. Then I want to turn attention to my edges. Like I said, I want to round them up. Then we're going to do a little bit more flavor adding. Okay. Now my router table isn't too clean, but we're going to focus on it anyway. What I've got in here, because I've got 1-inch material, is I've got a 3/16 radius roundover bit right here. Now I want to be careful on this because obviously I don't want to round over anything in here, because that's going to be where I'm going to be fitting to. All of this I can round over. On the aprons, because they're going to be fitting in right here, I don't want to round that over. So I'm going to stop back just short, and then we'll clean that up a little bit by hand. Then we'll come back. Now, I cleaned up my edges some, and I told you I've got that oscillating sander. Let's assume for a moment you don't. Like I said, you can simply take a piece of 80 grit sandpaper or something, clean these up a little bit. You can also pick you up something as simple as a little drum sander. Whoops. We're going to need that wire brush. And just, get your bandsaw marks out. That's all you got to do. Nothing no harder. We just want something that you can run, that's relatively smooth. It ain't got to be perfect. Then over to the router table, and you can use a handheld router if you don't have one. And even then, if you don't have a router, then just simply take and put this in here, take a little drum sander and just ease your edges. That's all. And one thing I forgot to mention, when you're hand planing these, trust me guys, there's a lot more of that on the floor. If, when you start planing, you're tearing your grain, one of the things you have to learn when you're planing is to read the grain, which way the grain is going, and you don't want to go against it. If you're trying to tear out, simply reverse direction. And set your plane just a little lighter. Okay. I'm going to go over to the router table, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to set it up just enough to get a little round over on it. Now, like I said, I'm using a 3/16. If you're using 3/4 material, you probably want to use a quarter radius. That's it. Just get you a round over on it. Then I'll show you what we do once we get it assembled. I'm going to get them routed. We'll come back and we'll do it. All right, guys, I realize most people don't have a stapler or a brad nailer, but a lot do. I'm cheating. Now, you could just as easily glue these on, let them set. I'm cheating a little bit. Just for speed. Now all I'm doing is I'm adding some cleats in here, like I told you, so we can drill them and screw to the top once it's together. In other words, these are going to sit in here just like so, and that cleat's going to give us something to attach to. All right, I'm going to pick out a side, inside, outside. I don't guess it matters. I've got another little one I'm going to put right in the center of here. Now, these are only about 3 inches long, so this is not going to affect my expansion and contraction. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Yeah, it's a funny thing when you do that. It always lands glue side down, don't it? Now, I want to make sure I've got plenty Now once this is together, we're actually going to put a little glue block here in this corner, meaning when this is attached, like so, we're going to put just a little glue block in here to reinforce that joint. I'll show you, because I'm going to do something a little different there. You can just as easily screw it and plug it or whatever. Now I'm holding back on this one about 7.5 inches before my first cleat. That's going to give me room You know what's fun about these, and those of you who've never seen me before, you're lucky. Most of the stuff I build is period 18th century reproductions and stuff like that. But something like this it allows me to get in the shop and just knock something out just for fun. I don't have to worry about every little nick, chip. You know, I don't have to drive myself nuts. I want it to look old, so I just don't have to worry about it. And like I told you, people like them. I do. I like the old primitive hand-hewn looks. But I got to tell you something. Because you're doing it primitive and because you're doing it to look old, that is not an excuse for poor craftsmanship and not having things fit well. That's not the object of the game. Okay, we are pretty close to getting ready to go together here. Let me go, I forgot to put that cleat in the middle of there. So let me do that. Now I want to talk a little bit more about this pine, or in this case the hemlock, and those loose knots. I was about to get reminded on the table saw when I was cutting these little blocks. Loose knots, like I said, they'll tear up your planer, they'll tear up your tools. But in a table saw, those things can come back at you like a bullet. And if you think they're not hard and won't do some damage, you're wrong. So make sure you've got on safety goggles and make sure that you're well protected. The best thing to do is know how to identify them, check them, and don't use them. Now, and like I said, if you've got a big one and you've got to use that piece of wood, take a hammer, knock that knot out. And where we looked at the black on it, that black membrane around there, you got to clean that off, as well as inside the hole. Clean it out really well. You got to get down to solid wood. If the knot will fit back in really well, then you could use just a good wood glue. But if not, or if you have any questions about it, make sure just to take some good epoxy. But you got to clean that membrane out. You can't just knock the knot out, put glue on it, put it back. Okay, because that membrane, like I said, it's like a thin layer of bark. And what happens is you glue it to the inside of the hole, but the knot can come loose from the other side of the membrane. Does that make sense? Take a scrape and clean that knot off and clean that hole out. Okay, if you're using pine or anything that's got a knot. Okay, I think we're about ready to go together with the base. Yeah, I'm gonna grab some clamps. We're gonna see what we got to do here to get it together, and we'll be right back. I'm back cheating again. I got everything dry fitted up. Now I'm gonna stick these little corner blocks right up in here to reinforce it. Now the other thing those corner blocks do, that gives me a lot of strength so that these legs can't flex in and out. So a little glue. Now again, I'm throwing a staple in there. When I stain it and do everything I'm going to do to it, they'll just disappear. You won't know they're there. And they're also galvanized since this is going outside. And that brings up another point. Since it is going outside, make sure you use, a good exterior fastener. Okay, I'm going to get my 4 corner blocks glued in, then I'm going to let the glue dry a little while. And I'm going to go to work on the top while that's happening. Now, I'm going to do a little thing on the outside here that I like. I've got some of these 1.5 inch. These are actually a reproduction rose head nail. And after everything dries, I'm going to pre-drill, and I've got everything done. I want to get everything done before I put these in because I don't want to mess up my nails. I'm going to drill 3 holes, just small holes, and I'm going to nail this in. It gives a tremendous holding power. But I like that, seeing those rose head nails in there. It kind of adds to the old flair of it. Kind of fun. Okay. Glue blocks in place, clamped up. Let's get to a top. All right, guys. Now comes the fun part. Let's think about this top a minute. Over a couple hundred years, people would sit on it. They sit here, their hands would go across the corners, so the corners would be worn. If they sit in it enough, you might have a little dip in here where the legs work and whatever. So this is a draw knife. Most don't have one. You can take a little hatchet and start chopping and chipping, or you can leave it ever what you want to do. But I like droopy corners. Now, I'll tell you what works really good. If you got a random orbit sander, is take some 80 or something like that and work these corners and round them. You got a spoke shave. Work it. You can take that same little hand plane and do it. Just go easy. Now, I'm not going to do it on this one. I don't know. Maybe I will. You see people take keys and all these things and beat them up. You know, the problem with that is no matter what you do, it's hard to get it looking natural. People always seem to get a pattern going. You know, put little nicks and whatever in it. Find you somewhere that there's some asphalt that's got a little bit of gravel on it. Not a lot, just some gravel. Turn it upside down and walk on it. Okay, move it, walk on it again. You might have to do a little gravel picking when it's all said and done, but I'm going to tell you what, it gives the most natural wear look of anything I know of for putting nicks and distressing a little bit. Now, when we finish this, in order to accent all of this, what we're going to do is we're going to do a stain, an exterior stain. Now, those of you who are a little bit familiar with me, you know on furniture and whatever, I use a lot of dyes. Dyes are not exterior grade. Okay, dyes are not meant for outside. They fade really fast. So we're going to use a good exterior stain. Then we're going to put down an exterior finish. We're going to give it a light little scuff, get everything smooth. Then we're going to take a little darker stain and go over that as a glaze, and that's what's going to accent all of our years of damage. Okay. Get it shaped kind of like you want, nice rounded edges, worn down. Think about what could have happened to it for years. You know, I'm not above knocking a big hunk out of a corner and then kind of shaping it in. Look kind of neat. Sky's the limit. And there's no such thing as wrong. Not on these. When we're done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give everything a little light hand sand with some 220 just to smooth it up a little bit. Any of the little planer nibs or whatever, just knock them off. Now, remember earlier I told you, you might need that wire brush. You can take a wire brush, this is just a little brass wire brush, and run along these edges or up and down the edges of the actual bench, and it's going to scratch them. Now, this is a relatively fine one, and it'll put little tracks and marks, run up on the bottoms of your feet a little bit so that they're not perfectly smooth and those little scratches, so when you stain it, they're all going to stick in there, and this area will come up a little darker, and as well as the feet. Makes kind of a neat look. Okay, I'm going to finish up the top. We come back, we'll be sanded, we'll be ready to get some finish going, and we'll be done. All right. I'm ready to get some finish on this. Now what we did, we took that wire brush, and I don't know if you can see this end real well, but because of the hemlock, because of that hard and soft grain, we take that wire brush and come down, and it almost looks like it's sandblasted. It's a pretty neat effect it gives it. It looks like it's set out in the weather, and you know, if you sandblast them, or you see old barn wood where you got the hard and the soft grain, it's all ridged and whatever, really look kind of neat, and it's real because we just kind of speeded it up a little bit. Now what we're doing, we did the same thing with that wire brush, up and down the legs like I showed you. Now what we're going to do is get a pre-stain on here because, well, this stuff doesn't like to stain at all. That hard and soft grain in there, it just really blotches and goes nasty looking. And even though I want this old looking, I don't want it, what's the word I want here? I don't want it looking poorly done. And if I just slap stain to this without doing something, I know what's going to happen. It's going to go dark and look kind of nasty and all. And I want to keep kind of the pine look with the aged look. So we'll take a look at that as we move. Okay, so right now I'm getting a pre-stain on it. We're going to let this dry. Give it another coat after we give it a light scuff. And that's going to, what the pre-stain is going to do is it's also going to raise any grain or any fibers. We give it a light scuff, that's going to take the majority of it out. Then we put another coat on, and we're ready to stain it. We'll be right, by the magic of turn that camera off, wait a while, and turn it back on. We'll be right back. Okay guys, we're ready to finish. I've got my pre-stain on and everything's nice and smooth, good to go. What we're using is a nice exterior stain. All right, so all we're going to do is get a coat of stain on here, let it dry overnight, come back, and we'll finish it up. This is the bottom of the top. Now the stain I'm using is a water base. Because all I want to do here right now is add like I said, I want to add that honey, that nice little pine color. I just want a nice even coat. That's exactly what we want right now. See, I don't want this getting real dark because we're going to be using a darker stain in order to create the glaze effect to accent the age of it. Got it? Just a nice little light honey pine. All right, here we go. Now we've obviously got a little bit more flavor, if you will, added to the top side. One of the things I want to do is I'm staining this. I want to make sure that I want to work, because we've got all of our distressing. I want to make sure that I work the stain into it. That's why I'm applying such a heavy wet coat. All right. Now, I told you I wasn't sure if I was going to take it outside and walk around on it in the gravel. I did. But if you, my size, make sure you got a pretty flat area, don't bust your board. All right. There you go. I've got a nice nice little honey base. And already my distressed areas are starting to show. Now what we're going to do now is let this dry overnight, just because it's late in the day. We're going to let it dry, come back, and we're going to seal it off with a good waterproof, a good exterior top coat. Then we're going to glaze it and put one more on it, and we got it. I'm going to do the base. When we come back, we'll finish it up. Okay guys, before I left, I put a coat of exterior finish. The base color that I used was a General Finishes outdoor stain called Butternut. Then on top of that, I put a coat of exterior 450 water-based finish. Now I've come back and I've given it a light scuff with some 320, just enough to make sure everything's smooth. Now what I'm using is the same water-based exterior stain in the color cedar. Now this is the key to distressing something. You want something that's going to highlight the textures and everything you've put into it. You just want, what we're basically doing, because this is an exterior project, is we're using the exterior stains by putting on the first a coat of finish and then coming back over top of that with the stain. We're actually using the stain like a glaze. And actually what the concept is and what we're after is basically this stain is going to act like liquid dirt. Meaning that what we're after is we want it to hang in to all the texture areas. We can basically leave as much as we want. I can let this dry, add a little bit more to the edge or the feet or something. But what I'm after, again, is just to create or to accent the wear and the defects that we created. Now we could have gone a lot further with this project, no doubt. But what I wanted to give you was just a little something that you might find fun and you might have some fun doing it. Makes a neat little family project, something you can knock out in a weekend. And we've got our nails in. This is our top. When I get it all together, screw it all up tight. We have a little 5-board bench. Not difficult, and they could be a lot of fun. Give one a try. I'm Charles Neal. I'll catch you later.